Welcome to the Read Your Keys podcast. I am your host, Joel Lopez, and today my guest is Miss Sheri Lopez. She is the founder of You Can't Groom Me, and this organization provides education and awareness on trafficking, as well as the founder of Babs AZ. Sheri, welcome today to the Read Your Keys podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Joel. Thank you for having me.
All right. So yeah, I wanted to have you on because I think that I think now more than
sorry about that.
no, you're welcome. That's fine. Now more than any time that I've been aware of, I think this whole trafficking and all things that go on with that's been in the news quite a lot lately. So I think there is more of an awareness of that. But I think that you have some valuable insights onto that. So that's why I wanted to have you on and go ahead and speak about that. So welcome today, Sheri.
Thank you very much.
So can you kind of give us a little background about yourself and what you guys are doing there with You Can't Groom Me?
Sure, absolutely. So when I was 15 years old, I was groomed and trafficked by my high school boyfriend's father. And the journey was pretty long, close to 10 years. And I am one of the lucky ones that got rescued. A lot of kids that are trafficked don't ever get out. So I was very, very lucky. And from there, I went through extensive healing and different types of therapies to learn how to live in the real world and how to think for myself, and to be able to just function without fear of being beat or whatever could have happened to me. And then I went on to school and discovered that I really liked to learn, and I became a nurse, and I worked in various areas in the hospital, and found my niche in labor and delivery. But I still struggled with kind of the routine of hospitals, because I kind of missed that time in my life of learning how to conform to schedules. And so then when we relocated from Colorado to Arizona, I decided that I wasn't going to continue my nursing career, and did a couple of other things on the side just to kind of center myself. So I worked as a nanny for a while, and did some volunteering. And then I really felt that I was led to take what I experienced and that journey and do something with it. I just couldn't sit there and think that all that I experienced, and that was it. I had to do something. And so I formed the nonprofit You Can't Groom Me, with a focus on grooming and trafficking. But and I founded that in 2017. But as I started speaking about not only my story, but just about grooming and trafficking in general, I really became aware of how apps, social media, online games, those things are where the groomers are at now. And so I really focus all conversations that I have with adults and youth, and explain how grooming happens and things to look out for. And then I even show parents examples of some apps and all of the features where it shows adults interacting with kids, such as TikTok. And from there, I saw all kinds of pregnant young people in group homes. And I just had to do something about that. And so that's where Babs Birth and Baby Services was born.
If you don't mind, can we kind of go through some of your experiences, not to try and be voyeuristic in any way, but for some people, it's just kind of hard to imagine,
Right.
The 10 years. And it's like, well, why didn't you run away? Or, where were your parents? Things like that would be, questions at the forefront. So could you kind of, you could save some of the, you don't have to share all the details, but it's kind of an overview of kind of how that happens. Because for me as a father, that's something that's a worst nightmare kind of thing.
Right.
For one of my girls, or vice versa, because to me, I guess I could say I'm kind of naive to these things. So I'm coming from it from a naive, concerned parent's perspective.
Right. No, I'm happy to share. I'd like to share how I was groomed and how smooth groomers can be. And their whole goal is to gain your trust and then isolate you from those around you. And then in my case, it was blackmail that kept me captive. So the boyfriend and I was a good kid. I need to establish that from the beginning, because so many times it's just the stereotypical thing of they're runaways or they're in foster care, which, yes, they are at great risk. But I wasn't that situation. I had a mom and a dad. Both parents were employed. And I was the middle of three girls. The thing is, what I see looking back is I just never found my place in my home. So I was seeking love. I was seeking validation. I was seeking that I was important. My older sister excelled in everything that she did, so she got a lot of accolades and attention from that. And then my younger sister had learning disabilities, so she received a lot of attention from my parents, and I was just kind of there. I didn't stand out in anything. I didn't really struggle with anything, so I didn't have the attention that I felt that as a teen I needed. Not to blame my parents in any way at all, but I just look back now and know that's what made me become like easy prey. So starting out with the boyfriend, it would be simple things like, hey, let's just skip the last class of the day. And so we would do that. And then it eventually was, let's go to my house. And we're like, sure. And his dad was always there because his dad worked nights. There was no mom in his life. And he was just a really cool dad. He didn't have rules. You could eat what you wanted. You could watch whatever you wanted on TV. So it was just he was befriending me and helping me feel comfortable in that environment. Where at home you have rules, you have chores, you had expectations. When I would go to the boyfriend's house, anything was game. And so I liked that. I felt, grown up in some way.
Yeah.
I felt grown up, like I could make my own decisions at 15, and every 15 and 16-year-old thinks they know everything to begin with. And so then I started being invited to parties that his father would have on the weekends. And so I started lying to my parents. I had a good friend that was in walking distance, and I would just tell my parents I was going to go and spend the weekend at my friend's house. But really what I was doing was walking down to the elementary school by our house, and my boyfriend was picking me up, and I was actually staying at his house. And the parties were very benign in the beginning. I mean, there were obviously adults there. There were some other kids from my high school there too. It's something I had never experienced before, parties and drinking and music. And it was just not something that I was used to, but I felt grown up. I felt like somehow I was special and I belonged. And so it made me just kind of navigate to that a little bit more. And again, that was just part of his trap to make me feel comfortable.
Let me ask, Sheri, was your boyfriend, was he the same age as you, or was he older?
He was 2 years older than me.
Okay. But you same school though? Yeah,
same school. Oh, okay. 2 years older. And so that made me feel a little bit better that, I had an older boyfriend who had a car, which, that was cool back then. So anyway, so we would I'd go to these parties, and I'd say probably the first month, everything was harmless. There was nothing. I would go over there usually on a Saturday. The party would be Saturday night. I'd spend the night there on the couch, and I'd come home on Sunday, and it was fun. Well, then there was one time I woke up after a Saturday night and I realized I had different clothes on. And I thought that was odd. But they had told me the way they justified it is that I had drank too much and I spilled alcohol on my clothes. And so they were so kind to change me.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, I'm like, okay, that doesn't make sense. But at 15, you're like, oh gosh, how nice you care that much about me.
Yeah.
But as these parties went on, there was actually one time that I woke up in their basement and I was being raped by somebody I didn't know. And of course, I fought and tried to get away, which I obviously couldn't. The person was much stronger than me and overpowered me. But one thing I noticed too in the room is that there was video equipment everywhere. So in essence, everything that had been done to me, one, I was being drugged to knock me out.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, everything was being recorded. And that was the blackmail that they used against me to keep me compliant. Because, of course, you don't want your family or your friends to know. And during that time, my mom was having some hard times and was kind of getting suicidal. And I had confided in my boyfriend who had shared that with his father. And so that was another way they were able to manipulate me by saying, well, you don't want us to show this to your mom. And then she commits suicide and succeed, and it will be your fault. And when you're 15, having that put on your shoulders is quite hard to bear.
Right.
And so I complied with everything that they asked me to do.
And then, so looking back, so your boyfriend was kind of in on it. He was kind of the lure very much. That's what his dad had trained him to do, I guess.
Right. Yeah, his dad had trained him to do that. And see, that's not uncommon. Good, attractive, good-looking teen boys are often used. Not saying that's all of them, but if there's a grooming cycle, those young men are often used as lures to bring the young girls in.
Mm-hmm. And then so you have this initial episode, and then you're blackmailed into it, and then so it escalates from there, where now they're demanding that you be there at certain times, or it's just kind of like when you come around, because I can't speak, the decision making of a 15-year-old girl or any 15-year-old is not the best anyway. Right. So is it hey, I'm going to try and stay away, or is it right away they tell you these things and you see the cameras, and so that's obvious what they're doing. How does that work?
I was very compliant. I was scared. I was very, very scared. I was compliant. I complied. I could not bear the thought that I would be the responsible for my mom's death. And I just kept thinking, because they would tell me just another video. So I always thought there was an end to it. I always thought there would be an end to it. And mind you, during this time, I'm still going to high school. I'm still going to school Monday through Friday. Now, this was back in the 80s. So this talk, and until recently when the term trafficking and grooming came up, I never even had a name for what was happening to me. So there was no way I could exactly explain to anybody what was happening to me. I would have just been labeled a bad kid, which I wasn't a bad kid. I was being abused, but there was no terminology to share.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we think of abuse in other ways as, like, hey, you're in the house and you're being sexually abused, or sexual assault or rape as a one-time thing, but not in kind of ongoing thing, or where you have a relationship with your abuser in the way that you had.
Right. And they know, maybe not so much now, but back then they knew that they had you. there were no avenues for me to get help. There was, I would have been labeled a bad kid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, looking back now, I think, yeah, I should have run away. I should have told somebody. I should have told the police. I know that there were times that I acted out to try and get attention at home to say,
Mm-hmm.
so that I could get in trouble and get grounded or something to
Mm-hmm.
keep me home. But it didn't work. And, I was, my personality completely changed as a teenager
How
living at
so?
home. Well, I was angry, very
Oh,
angry.
obviously, right.
I was, I would pick fights with my sisters. I would yell at my parents. And again, they just thought I was being either rebellious or just a bad kid. Like, what's wrong with you? Well, how do I tell you what's wrong with
Yeah.
me? How does any 50-year-old tell you that you're being sexually abused in that manner when you don't even comprehend it yourself? You're still
Right.
trying, your brain is not developed enough to be able to understand what is happening to you. And very quickly, I learned how to detach from my body. So mentally, I was not there. I would just float off and go away mentally and then come back to my body when the assaults were over.
Mm-hmm.
That was how I coped.
Right. And then so, we have the beginning where you're drugged, and then so in like the middle or end, is it still there at the house, or has it escalated? Because you did mention that there was a physical abuse on top of it.
Oh my goodness, there was all kinds of abuse. No, it did. It stayed in that home all the way until I was 18 and I graduated high school. But the thing that really changed it for me is because I was struggling a lot during those last few years of high school, and my relationship with my parents had obviously become very rocky, and they couldn't understand me, and I just couldn't share with them what was happening. Some because I didn't, again, understand. I don't know if I didn't trust them. I just didn't feel that I could. And so I turned 18 in March, 2 months before I was to graduate high school. My parents said, well, because you don't want to go to college, you're 18, you got to get out. And so they kicked me out of my house. And I'm like, okay, where am I going to go? Well, that's when I had no choice but to move in with my boyfriend and his family. And then so for those last 2 years of my high school years, it was pretty bad. It was assaults almost every evening. A lot of what, and I don't have any proof, but I was always told that a lot of what was the videos that were taken were sold to like pedophile rings and pornography sites and stuff like that. And it would go from just the rape to being beat on camera to being forced to eat things that I didn't want to eat. Like right now, I really struggle with these masks with COVID because one way that I was forced to comply was to be smothered and to the point of passing out to comply and do what I was being asked to do. And so I struggle with those masks a lot right now.
So where is the light at the end of the tunnel for you in going through and getting out?
Well, so in my 18th year, during those last 2 months, and I graduated, and I was able to find somebody that let me stay with them, and they started inviting me to the church. So I would go to their church, but yet my trafficker was still very much there, still forcing me to do things on the weekends. I met this guy in church, and I was just begging this person to marry me, hoping that that would stop everything. And so I did get married at 18, but it didn't stop anything. It did not stop anything. My trafficker was still there. In fact, it just made it worse because it made that relationship horrible. absolutely horrible. So that marriage didn't last. So he was still very much there in the picture the whole time.
And then so is it the same issue though? That the blackmail is still there.
Mm-hmm.
So even though now I'm married, the things he has over my head
Yeah.
are still he's still able to wield them over me.
Oh yeah, and there's just so much of it now. There was just
Hmm.
so much of everything that had been taped, and I really thought at that young age that if I got married, because I was married, it would stop.
Hmm.
You know, and no, that didn't happen at all. And so it was just a really bad marriage, and I could never give to that marriage because I was still just trying to survive. So it
Yeah,
didn't last.
yeah.
So I ended up back with my trafficker, but at some point my trafficker sold me to another trafficker. So throughout my journey, I was in several different states being sold to other traffickers. Um, so I was in Texas, I was in Oklahoma, um, Las Vegas, and of course Colorado.
Hmm.
I was in Arizona for a short while when they forced me to dance at one of the strip clubs here locally. But every trafficker's game is a little bit different in what they expect you to do. Um, One trafficker was more on the high end of things. Very much kind of like a Jeffrey Epstein, except no island, of course.
Hmm.
But this is very common too, and they're often called escorts. And so you dress up pretty and you go and you have very rich customers. And so I would be flown to New York, I'd be flown to other states to meet up with these customers who would spend a lot of money to have you with them for the whole weekend. And the thing is that I never got any of this money.
Hmm.
I just got dished out whatever that customer wanted.
Right.
And some of my customers were very rich people. I mean, I had judges, people that bought me, judges, police officers, teachers,
Hmm.
um, political people. The gamut's out there.
And then so you're going through this, and then so what is when is the enough? Is there a moment
Yeah,
where it's just like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore.
yeah,
I'm my own person. God didn't make me for this.
right, right. Well, by the time I had gotten to the end of this journey, I was just a walking shell. I
Hmm.
I wasn't feeling. I was a puppet. But the last place that I was at, one of my responsibilities in the home was to get the mail. And so I'd always go to the mailbox, and there would be this little old lady there. She probably wasn't that old, but to me at that time, being in my 20s, she looked old to me,
Hmm.
probably my age now. But um, she would always be there and talk to me. Every time I went to get the mail, she was there. She was just very nice. And she would say, "Oh, honey, I know you're in something bad.
Hmm.
I'm praying for you."
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, I was a mean, nasty person then. I wasn't very nice. My language was terrible. I was just not a nice person. I was totally void of any life. Um, and this happened for months. I mean, she was there months and months and months and months. And then it was one day I had gotten a pretty bad beating for not being obedient. And I went to the mailbox, and she was there, and she said, "Honey, come with me today. Just come with me." And I did. I just walked away with her.
Wow.
And she took me to her church. And this little tiny church just surrounded me and wouldn't let me leave. Now they would probably be charged with kidnapping, but all these people just came, and they were just around me. And boy, I was mean. I was mad. I knew I was going to get in trouble. Um, I was just scared. And
Hmm.
they were the ones that opened the door to help me get rescued. And my sweet little angel, her name was Pearl.
Hmm.
And
Perfect, right? Pearl.
I never thought about that until now. But she was the one that helped me start my journey to healing, and she has since gone home to the Lord. But it was that little church that really just started the journey. And then from there, it's just God took over and just connected me to people to help me learn how to heal and go through all that, probably close to 4 years of trying how to live and heal and do all that stuff. And then, of course, during that time, I came to know the Lord, which just dramatically changed my life. There's just tremendous healing that I don't think ever would have been able to take place had I not have a relationship with Him.
Right.
And I feel so blessed that there's big chunks of what has happened to me I truly cannot remember.
Yeah.
I cannot remember. And I view that as a blessing.
Yeah, that's a blessing for sure. Yeah, I spoke to a friend of mine. She was actually on a few podcasts. I think the second one, Senta Terry. She worked in a home in Las Vegas, and it was for women who had come out of trafficking. But she said the big thing with women who have come out of it is separating that you are not the things that you did.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very, very profound, because a lot of like common wisdom is like, yeah, you are your habits, or you are the, your accomplishments, that's very much, I am what I do. And that can be healthy if you look at it from a healthy perspective, because you want results for certain things. But when you're dealing with something like this, it's very easy to internalize that yeah, like that I am these things. And then the devil is a liar too, right? So like you've done it once before, so he kind of keeps you down on that path. And then so when you were going to church and you went with that woman, was there any of like the old traffickers trying to come and get you, or was it just like?
Oh no, they were all still there. They wondered where I had gone to. Traffickers usually have a network, and so they have all kinds of like spotters, people that try to follow you or keep track of you, especially if you bring in a lot of money for the trafficker. They have people that follow you. It's almost set up like a drug ring type. You've got the big guy up top, and then you have all these other people down that do all of the work. And no, they knew where I went, and yes, they did. But what helped me was getting out of the state. I left, and that helped. But it just took a really long time for me to figure out, and sometimes even now, who I am. That stuff is always there. Triggers still occur, like with the masks. But the one thing that I have is that I have very much separated that what happened to me was not my choice, that, I did it to survive, and it does not define who I am. But I've been through a lot of my healing journey, but that's something that people who are coming out of trafficking really, really struggle with. And they struggle with just even knowing how to live without somebody telling them what to do all the time. And that's why it's not uncommon at all for somebody who's been rescued from trafficking to actually run away and go back several times until they're ready.
What do they call that? It was like Stockholm syndrome. It's like
yeah, they call it a trafficking bond. You're just bonded to that person because that's all you know. And it also depends upon when it happens. Did it happen during your formative years? Did it happen when you were older? That can play into it as well.
Well, yeah, especially since you were so young, you could say it was hard wiring that needs to be undone. And there's something about the familiar, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's something that is really awful,
Yeah.
it's the familiar, and
Right.
you'd almost, I don't want to speak for anybody, but it's just sometimes as people, we'd rather deal with what we know, even though it's awful, than the unknown.
Yeah. That's very true. It's what you know what's expected of you. You know what you're supposed to do to get it to end, and then you can go on with whatever was next on your list.
I think of, there's a lot. I think there's a lot of wisdom in the Bible, and you talk about, the Hebrews, going into the promised land, and they're, on their way to the promised land, but they're looking for food, and they complained to Moses that, at least in Egypt we knew where the food was, and in your head, you read these things, and you're like, why would you want to go back to Egypt? That's where you were a slave. Um, but we could see that in people, in these situations, like, we discussed, it's like the familiar has a very powerful
Mm-hmm.
draw on us. And we can, we can learn from that. Like, when we look at the Bible, like that's talking about people all the time. That's how we behave. God has, a promised land for you,
Yeah.
but you can't see it. And there might be some battles that you have to fight to get into the promised land. But so much of us wants to, because it's the path of least resistance, right? It's like, I don't know if I'm capable of going into this fight to get
Yeah.
what God has promised for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a scary. But my hat's off to you though, Sheri. I mean, that's not an easy thing to discuss, and I appreciate that. You're helping people now. That it's so people say it's cliche, but God will have the take your test and make it a testimony, and you're a testament to that.
Well, I just can't let what happened to me just sit there. I really sincerely do not want any child to ever experience what I have gone through. So if I can not only share my story, but share how easily it can happen and how easy it is now with social media the way that it is, and all of these apps and all these young kids wanting to be the next superstar discovered, singer, dancer, whatever. They're all over on social media and they can be easily groomed. And my goal is always to get in front of the parents. The parents
Mm-hmm.
need to know this. They need to know how to spot potential danger. Like I talked about how I just completely changed as a person when I was a child. Of course, it's hard to decide is it a child just being a typical teenager,
Right,
or is it
right.
something different? But I tell parents to trust their gut. If they really feel that something's off, talk to your kids. You know,
In retrospect, do you think there was anything that you could you could have, or your parents could have said to you that would have helped you to come forward? Because that's a huge burden for a 15-year-old girl to be able
yeah,
to come forward. And I think maybe even in the best relationship, right? Because there is this, how could I have put myself in that situation? Or I feel like, for lack of better, I feel, stupid for putting myself in that situation. Are they going to get mad at me?
yeah.
All the things that I can think of that, when you get in trouble when you get yourself in a bad spot for anything, let alone, something as severe as this.
Well, I always thought about how in the world could I disappoint my parents in this way? Like I felt like I was responsible for everything that happened to me at that time. That I should have done something to be able to stop it, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what to do. And back then, no, I really don't think there's anything I would have been able to do or say to get my parents' attention, other than I was just, a very different kid, and I wish that they would have clued in on that.
Mm-hmm.
Although then at that time, I don't know that there were really that many resources for anybody to be able to help. I probably would have just been sent to a therapist or something like
Yeah.
that. Now there is so much more, and parents have a tremendous opportunity to be able to become educated about this topic of grooming, to be able to intervene beforehand. But I can tell you, even today, young kids who are possibly being groomed, even if you feel that you have a good relationship with your kids, they may not tell you. So you need to look for all of the external indicators, because what's going on internally in you is going to come out physically. I mean, just an example, when we have a bad day, we're grouchy or we're just not our normal self. So that stuff will come out in your kids too.
Mm-hmm.
And you just got to key into that. And it's good to have conversations with kids about, we've had such focus years on years about stranger danger, teaching your kids not to talk to strangers out
Right.
and about. Well, that same conversation needs to happen online. Just because somebody is on the other side of the screen, you don't know them.
Right.
You don't know what they want from you. You don't know what their intentions are. And there is no way in the world a kid can have 1,000 friends. It's impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that, it's new, right? Because I didn't grow up with social media, and that's why, I wanted to have this conversation with you, because it's like I have blind spots, and I'd like to not have, as a father, I'd like to have the least amount of blind spots as possible, just because, I care about my kids, and, I want them to grow up and, and be kids as long as possible, until they're, until it's time for them not to be kids. But what are some of the, we'll kind of start, if we can, just from, aside from, hey, you've noticed some different behavior, what are some other common signs maybe that, hey, there might be something going on that parents like myself could look for or notice?
Right, sure. So there's things too that can happen where perhaps they have new clothes, they have more expensive items than they would normally have, they have a second cell phone, they are in their room on the time on social media. So those are some things too. I have a great presentation that I share in the community. It's called Behind the Screen. And it's a 1-hour presentation, and it talks about grooming and trafficking and how it happens. It shows examples of adults interacting with kids. It talks about the dark web. And the reason I share about the dark web is because sometimes groomers are not necessarily grooming to meet the child, but they want to get sexual images of the kids. And they can capture those on a lot of social media sites. And on the dark web, there's a lot of pedophile rings that require the members to provide new content monthly to maintain their memberships. And these are pedophiles. And so they're seeking new content all the time. So I want people to understand that someone who's trying to groom a child, again, doesn't necessarily mean that they want to meet them for sexual reasons. It could be just a bra and panty shot. It can be an underwear shot. It could be more than that. And that's what they want. And they prey on the weakness of girls, especially who have this, I call it Cinderella syndrome. We've all been trained as young girls to think that a man who's a prince is going to come and rescue us, and we're going to have this beautiful life. These young girls who are coming into just adolescence, and they're interested in boys, and they are looking for that guy that's just going to make them feel like they're complete. They are more complicit about providing whatever that person on the other end is asking them, because they'll say things like, well, I love you, baby. Just do this for me. Just do this for me. It'll be between us, and so that conversation happens. And then girls they're very eager to please.
Yeah, that's something, as a father, and just you know understanding dating dynamics, is I think that very much there is a part of a woman that craves to be sought after.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and especially, online, if there's somebody who is providing that's kind of a, I don't know if that's a gateway, but just that there's somebody who is affirming you, and to keep that going, to want to keep that affirmation, and
Yep.
then that they would be willing to do things that are out of character, or you know I'm not a woman, so I can't speak to that, but maybe there is a part where it's like, hey, this person gives me a certain amount of attention, and
Yes.
I want to keep that going, and I don't want to disappoint them.
Right.
And it's a wonderful thing if it's with a man who has good intentions
Yes.
for a woman, but for
Right.
someone who's just being manipulative, then, well, now there's an issue.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. They and groomers are very good at this. They understand what to say, what to do. They learn how to separate the child from the parent slowly. So on social media now, it could be starting out very innocent and, oh, you're so cute. Usually the groomers make a fake profile on their social media sites, showing an image of a teenager around the age of the child they're trying to target. And they do a lot of research on the person that they are potentially going to groom. So they see their other social media sites, they see the likes, dislikes, and so this fictitious character that they're creating is going to appeal to the, let's just say, girl that they're going to target.
Mm-hmm.
And so the the guy will reach out to the girl, and 9 times out of 10 the girl's going to respond, and then they start a conversation and they start talking about things that are supposedly in common. All this time this girl's thinking she's talking to somebody her age. I show an example on that behind the screens of a parents that put their child to the test. So this guy came in and created a fake profile and did all the stuff that we just talked about. And within seconds, the girl responded. The guy said that he was a photographer and really wanted to use her as a model. And the girl, of course, that's exciting to a girl. Being a model
Mm-hmm.
means in today's society that you're beautiful. And so
Right.
she met this girl at the park. No
Wow.
questions asked,
How
nothing.
how 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 quickly was that, within a matter of days, that kind of,
Matter of days. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
And this is parents who have had the conversation with their daughter, or
No,
was
they
this
had
just
that
kind of like,
conversation.
hey, we're just going to test?
No, I believe that they've had the conversation because during the video, the parents are in a van in the park, so they see everything that's happening, and the young girl never gets in the car to go with the guy, of course, because it's all a setup. But the mother did say, "I thought you would never do this again." So, and the young
Again.
girl again. So the young girl's reasoning was that she was meeting this guy at a public park, so she didn't feel there was anything to be worried about. And so
Mm-hmm.
traffickers are very smart and they realize this. But his ploy was, oh, hey, I'm so and so's friend. He decided the lighting's not good here, so he's down the road. You want to get in the van with me, and we'll go
Mm-hmm.
um, there to the other place. And she was going to get in the van. But then that's, of course, when it ended the experiment. But
Mm-hmm.
that just shows how easy it can happen.
Yeah.
Very, very easily.
Well, I guess that very much goes to the draw of a young woman, that affirmation,
Yeah.
the hey, he thinks I'm
Yeah.
pretty enough to photograph. Are there certain social media websites where you're like, hey, be aware, whether it be Facebook or Instagram, because I think those are like you mentioned TikTok, and that's
TikTok's
relatively
huge.
new. Yeah, because
Yeah, no,
that
TikTok is
TikTok's been around for maybe a year. I just heard about it, but I'm not
oh,
in social
TikTok's
media
been
for
around
that.
for a couple of years.
Okay.
And it's an app that has all kinds of the fun features on it too. But one thing it has is a duet feature, and so it can be two people singing the same song and acting out whatever actions are involved in that song. Of course, they're not in the same room, but older men really like to troll that site to interact with young girls and act out these songs. And some of the images or the videos that you see from TikTok are kind of disgusting. But the thing is, I don't encourage parents to figure out the apps, because as soon as you try to figure out one app, there's 3 or 4 new ones.
Right, that's true.
It's more about having the conversation with your kids about strangers online and learning how to use social media in a positive way. And that just because somebody tells you something on social media doesn't mean that it's fact. If you don't know them, how can they be your friend?
Right.
And you don't, having 500 to 1,000 followers doesn't mean that you're important, but to kids that means something. Like, oh my gosh, I have so many likes my video, I posted it, and oh, look at all these people that are watching my video, they love me. Trying to teach kids to separate their value from these social media sites.
Right. Well, especially if they're getting these likes, I think it goes back to this affirmation. You're getting all these affirmations from people that what you're doing is, pleasing. So yeah, I guess it does come down, because you're right. You're right. You're not gonna stay ahead of the curve when it comes to these new social media apps. Like I'm a big sports guy, Sheri, but so they always talk about like drug testing, but it's like for sports, but it's like the tests are always behind, because the new drug that comes out is always ahead of the curve from what they're drug testing. And I guess it's kind of the same thing, right? Like in my mind, I can't think of like, why would you want to do this to children? But there are people who that's what they dedicate themselves to. So the need to be vigilant is important. And I guess one of the takeaways that I'm getting from you is just hey, talk to your kids, like have that communication. I don't think that you can be aware of everything that they're doing alone, but you can like give them guidelines that, like, 1,000 friends, you're gonna have a friend that you've never met in person. Like that's I mean,
right.
You might have something in common with them, but I was like, you're a teenager. How much do you have in common that you guys, like the same movies or the same music? That's
yeah.
But I guess that's hard for a teenager.
It is.
Who doesn't have, their head wrapped around the whole world. And I mean, I'm a grown man, and I still realize that the older I am, the less that I know. But I can't imagine, when I was a teenager, that I knew everything.
But
it's different being a boy too. What's that?
I said, as teens, they think that they do.
Right.
And so it's hard to be able to sometimes send that message home to teenagers. So it's good if you can get to them when they're in their adolescence, their preteen years, to start sending this message home about social media, stranger danger.
I wanted to ask, this is one of the things that I know we're kind of pressed for time. But there's a big thing going on right now with this Netflix movie Cuties.
Oh, yeah.
Have you?
I did watch it.
Oh, you watched it?
I had to watch it so that I could speak on it. I understand the message that they're trying to send. So the premise of the movie is it's a family. They have an 11-year-old daughter. She's trying to find her place, which is very normal at that age. She connects with a group of girls that are at her school that are trying to get in a dance competition. Okay, so it shows the struggles of this young girl trying to find her place, trying to make friends, trying to be accepted. That makes sense. I get that. But where this movie went overboard is the sexualization of these kids. The dances were very, very provocative and very old. It's stuff that they've learned from watching all these videos out there now. The positions were very suggestive. The way that they dressed was inappropriate. The way the camera was zoomed in on specific body parts was totally inappropriate. And then there was one scene where the girl had taken the father's cell phone, and he found her with it, and she started walking to the bedroom, unbuttoning her pants. And so what does that suggest?
Mm-hmm.
Daddy, here, let's go mess around so I can have your phone. Of course, he didn't. He said, what are you doing? And he left. But what kind of a message does that send to our kids?
Yeah.
You know? No, it's terrible. And I actually did cancel my Netflix, and I let them know why.
Yeah.
That it's like they went to an extreme. So it's kind of like a message in the movie to pornography that just caters to pedophiles, that has nothing to do with the movie. They could have had a dance scene where it was just kids dancing around doing stuff. But no, I mean, these kids are on the floor grinding. They're getting shots of their bottoms, their tops. It was horrible. But I had to watch it because I needed to be able to speak on it. No, so I advise never let any kids watch it. But the whole thing is like, and this is happening just even in commercials, desensitizing our kids to sexual content.
Yeah.
So making it more normal and acceptable is what's happening. And I don't agree with that.
There's definitely been a slide, because I remember, like as a kid, Married with Children was a like a really popular show, and the teenage daughter, she was, for that time was considered very suggestive for the times. Like her and her friends group, they were dressed up and very suggestive. So there was a meme that I saw, and it was like, here's Married with Children in the 90s, and this is this girl's friend who was in that show. I'm not sure, but she's an older teenage girl, maybe 18. I don't know. I don't remember. So they have a split screen of her in that picture, and then they have like Disney show from like, I don't know, this might have been like 8 or so years ago. It's like, here are the Disney girls and how they're dressed, and they were dressed more provocative in the Disney show than they were in this show that was geared towards adults. And it was like, wow, like look at how far we've come, and now we have this Netflix movie where it's like, who is this okay? Like, what person is okay with the depicting young girls this way? But I think the slippery slope is real, like very much. There's an analogy of a frog in the pot and turning up the heat, and it's just like, this might be the moment where it's like, you know what, we've gone too far with a lot of these things, and this is where people need to say this is enough. I'm not accepting this for my family, for sure. One other thing too is that you do have another organization. So you have, You Can't Groom Me, which we've kind of spoke about extensively, but you also have Babs AZ. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that as well?
Sure. So our main nonprofit is You Can't Groom Me. And as I said, I was a nurse, so I was spending a lot of time in group homes, working with the youth on just online safety. But I started noticing a lot of pregnant individuals that were unsupported. They were alone. They weren't prepared for birth. They were coming from a place of emotional trauma. And I'm like, I have to do something about this. I cannot leave these kids alone. They're already going through so much. So that's when I created Babs Birth and Baby Services, and that launched a year ago, May, and now I have an amazing team of birth doulas, your wife included, who I love so much. And so our goal is to be there not only for the pregnant individuals that just are low income and really can benefit from the support of a birth doula and the education that comes from preparing for birth, labor, delivery, postpartum, and parenthood, but also those that are coming from a place of emotional trauma and that truly need the support to learn how to emotionally connect with their body so that labor and delivery won't be so traumatic for them. And that's been growing, and there's definitely a need for it. And it seems like in our community, so much of what are usually expensive services, obviously, that the underserved can't benefit from. So I really felt that they deserved to have a voice and the ability to be able to birth their baby as confidently and empowered as possible through education and being able to advocate for themselves.
Very cool. And how has it been with all this coronavirus stuff? Have you been? Are you still able to take on new clients? And
oh yeah, we're still working with them. We've moved a lot to a virtual set. We haven't been able to attend the births in person for quite some time, but we're trying to prepare them. And if they have a partner, we really try to prepare the partner to be able to learn how to support the birthing person so that they feel confident together. But the hospitals are starting to open up some of their policies. So I think that we're going to be starting to get back in there soon. And so we've been in the Phoenix area for about a year and a half, and now we are expanding to Tucson. So we're getting our team together down there. So there's definitely a need for what we do.
Yeah. And do you think that now with, the restrictions in hospitals that you'll see more home births and, what do you call it? Alternatives to hospitals for births to?
Well, and I'm sure a lot of that is happening, but the clients that we support don't have the financial resources to pay for a birth center or a midwife. So those are not very common. We get them on occasion if I know that that's something that's very important to a family, and they can raise the funds for a home birth and a midwife, but they can't raise the funds for what we do. I do the no cost just so that they can be supported the way they need to be. But the majority of the births that we provide support for are in hospital settings.
Okay. And then I did have a question because I didn't ask it specifically. So when it comes to You Can't Groom Me, you mentioned that you do a lot of presentations. So is this schools? Is this group home? Like where is right now? Are you getting, I guess, the opportunity to kind of tell this story and get this message out?
You know what? I'm hoping that this is changing, because for the long time, there's been a big pushback about just talking about grooming and anything that has the word sex in it, sex trafficking. Schools are very resistant to it. They don't want it in there. They don't want trouble from the parents. And I've had a big pushback from churches as well for the same reasons. They just don't want a lot of pushback, and they don't want their congregations to be upset. No, I do a lot of, right now it's been virtual conferences. I speak at a lot of national conferences and get the message out that way. I do the behind the screen presentation, and we'll do that with any group setting, whether a mom's group, anybody that basically will listen, I will share. So this has been a topic that people like to just not really, they don't want to hear about it because it makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah. And which is upsetting, especially like, cause I come from a faith background. It's a very big part of what's shaped my worldview. And I think it's disappointing to hear that churches won't talk about this, because, if the churches are going to tell the hard truths, I feel like they're abandoning their moral obligation or their duty for congregants to know the truth. And even in the Bible, it says, "My people perish for a lack of knowledge." Yeah. And how much, it is very upsetting to hear that they're not letting you to speak. Because this is so important. Like in the Bible, it says the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and how much more so that they're coming after children that you wouldn't want to protect. And I guess I understand that it's upsetting and things like that, but it's like, this is coming to kids. Like, why wouldn't you want to equip your congregation, your people, and their kids with the knowledge that, hey, like, this stuff doesn't, the devil doesn't have authority over us in this area. We're going to take and by
Right.
not talking about it, and schools too, because for the same reason. But schools, to me, it seems like they'll talk about sex education in all kinds of wild ways, but not in a way to protect a child.
I know.
That's somehow a line that gets drawn. But I guess
It's
that's
such a taboo topic, and people
mm-hmm,
don't like to address it. And sadly, it still is. Let's say, for example, a child was trafficked in a church congregation. People still in the back of their minds go, "What did that kid do to bring that on? Are you sure that kid didn't
mm-hmm,
um, really want to do this?" So there's all
yeah,
these thoughts. We got to retrain our brain and realize these kids are victims. And you can say, "Oh, yeah, go tell." That's not that easy.
yeah,
And people need to understand that.
yeah,
These kids are going through major trauma when that happens. And so they're walking around in a state of shock for a very long time.
mm-hmm,
And they can't even comprehend what's happening to them. So it breaks my heart. And I hate the word child prostitute because those two words cannot go together.
mm-hmm,
A
yeah.
child is not a prostitute.
No, yeah, yeah. That's something that's really hard to wrap your mind around.
Yeah.
Um, and so I wanted to be respectful of your time, Sheri. I know that you needed to get going.
Yes.
Um, so you can find Sheri Lopez at You Can't Groom Me. That website is ycgmaz.org, and babsaz.com. Is there anywhere else where you can be reached, Sheri?
I mean, we're on Facebook, but we have all of that linked on our social media, on our websites.
Okay.
All
All right.
right.
Well, this was an informative one, and I think one that needs to be had. Sheri, I appreciate this very much. Like I said, I'm a father, and I think most fathers, really need to know these things for their kids and parents in general. But I'm a father, so that's the perspective I come from. I feel like this is something that that needs to be talked about. That it can be a cruel world, but we need the adults to be adults. And I appreciate you, um, just taking what the devil made for bad and turning it into something good. I very much appreciate you, and kudos to you, Sheri. Was there any, last things you wanted to say before we wrapped up here today?
Just have conversations with your kids. Those are very important. Establish that good line of communication with everything. Keep social media out of the bedrooms. Have them all docked at night in one location. No social media in the bedrooms at night either. That's all I just say. But thank you so much, Joel, for giving me the opportunity to share a little about my journey and just what You Can't Groom Me and Babs is all about. And I hope that this has helped somebody who listens.
Me as well. That's the hope. So thank you so much. This is the Reach Your Peace